Well, good morning from the cottage farmstead kitchen. If we haven't met before, I'm Rebecca, and today I wanted to talk about how to convert a classic holiday cookie recipe to being gluten-free. It's about 4.5 years ago, I started having issues digesting gluten among other food sensitivities, so I started having to change how I cook things. And while there's lots of delicious recipes out there, there are a few things that you miss, especially during like the holiday season where you have memories of really delicious food and baked goods. So I started trying to find ways to make my favorite recipes gluten-free. So the recipe I have here today is for sourdough molasses cookies. They taste like a really delicious, soft gingerbread cookie, and it is perfect for this holiday season. A lot of times when you have to start eating gluten-free or a loved one has to start eating gluten-free, you're scrambling trying to find gluten-free recipes for everything. But you actually don't have to just toss out your entire recipe box when someone in your family goes gluten-free. You can actually use a lot of the recipes that you already have and convert them to gluten-free very simply. This recipe is not an originally written gluten-free recipe. A lot of the gluten-free recipes will call for cup flour or psyllium husk or xanthan gum, and there's a lot of things that you don't usually have in your kitchen, especially when you're trying to convert to gluten-free or you're trying to cook for a loved one that is gluten-free. So I want to talk about how I convert a traditional recipe with just 2 ingredients to being gluten-free. So the quickest and simplest way to convert a recipe to gluten-free is to use what's known as cup for cup or measure for measure flour. And I do use this a lot, but whenever you do start cooking with this, you will notice that a lot of your baked goods taste rather bland, as this is made up of potato starch, milled rice, and tapioca starch, and those are all extremely bland. We really don't think about it too much, but wheat actually has a bit of a flavor, and that goes into all of your baked goods. So when you start converting to gluten-free and you only use this, your baked goods will be kind of bland and everyone will know that you probably converted it to gluten-free. So when I was hunting around to find another flour that had some flavor to it, we tried chickpea flour, which to me has a very metallic flavor, even that translates into the baked goods. We tried sorghum flour, which is really good, but we don't have a whole lot of access to it. So another flour we discovered is buckwheat, and buckwheat comes in 2 forms. They have hulled and unhulled. Most people familiar with, say, buckwheat pancakes are more familiar with the unhulled variety. It's a bit grayer, has a bit of a grit to it. It tastes delicious, but it's not necessarily what you want in all of your tasty baked goods. So we discovered unhulled buckwheat. So as you can see right here, one of them hasn't had the hull taken off of it. So buckwheat with its hull is black. When they take the hull off, you can see it's nice and mostly wheat colored looking. So despite its name, buckwheat does not have any wheat in it, nor any gluten in it. We've not been able to find hulled buckwheat pre-ground anywhere on the internet to purchase, so we do buy it as groats, and then we use a grain mill to mill it into a flour. And you don't need to have a super fancy grain mill. The one that we use is from a Y2K and it's still going strong. If you have a high-powered blender, you could probably grind it in that, like a Vitamix or something like that, to turn this into a flour that you can bake with. So as you can see, once it's ground, the buckwheat looks like any other flour. And as delicious as this is, you unfortunately can't sub this 1-for-1 with regular all-purpose flour, because gluten is a binding agent in most of your baked goods, even your cookies. So what I have discovered is if I do 50% of the buckwheat and 50% of a cup for cup or a measure for measure flour, that it comes out tasting delicious. It has enough of the binding agent. This is fluffy enough to give it a nice light texture, while the buckwheat has the flavor in it. So one more note before I go and mill more buckwheat for baking with today is, as the recipe title implies, this is sourdough molasses cookie, so you do need a sourdough starter. A lot of times people associate sourdough with just wheat flour, but you can make sourdough with just about any starchy flour out there. The original dehydrated starter that I got was from Azure Standard, and I'll link below to that company if you want to get that precise gluten-free sourdough starter. But there's lots of different companies out there that you can get the original culture to get yours going. I found that it's very happy consuming cup for cup flour. And you treat it pretty much like any other sourdough starter. You feed it if you're going to keep it on your counter, or you can put it in your fridge for a week or 2 until you're ready to use it again. So I just pulled mine out of the fridge. I'm going to let it start warming up to room temperature so that I can use it in the sourdough molasses cookie recipe shortly. So this original recipe came from Homemade Food Junkie, and I will link below to the original recipe in case you want to make the same cookie. So like any other cookie recipe, you're going to mix your dry ingredients in one bowl and your wet ingredients in another one. And this recipe calls for 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And like we talked about earlier, I'm going to sub 50% cup for cup or measure for measure flour and 50% whole buckwheat flour. So if you're anything like me, you typically forget to soften the butter in advance. So I will show you one of my tricks in a minute on how to use melted butter instead, but still get the same texture. And the secret for using melted butter in your cookie dough is to pop your cookies in the fridge while your oven preheats, and the butter is able to set to about a softened consistency, and your cookies will turn out just fine. Well, I hope this video has helped you learn how you can make all of your favorite holiday cookies gluten-free, easily, and delicious, so that you don't have to miss out on any of the nostalgia and memory making this time of year. Catch you next time.